The reports are that U.S. Ambassador Pete Hoekstra berated using profane language Ontario's representative in Washington.
Tonight, a story that has shaken the quiet corridors of diplomacy and rippled across the Atlantic. In Ottawa, what began as a polished evening of polite conversation and polished glassware has turned into one of the most talked-about diplomatic incidents in recent Canadian history. It was meant to be a night of goodwill, celebrating the enduring economic partnership between Canada and the United States, two neighbors bound by trade, friendship, and shared history. But before the evening was through, the mood had changed dramatically. What unfolded at the National Gallery of Canada has now left officials scrambling, questions swirling, and relations between Ottawa and Washington under a cloud of tension. According to multiple eyewitnesses, the United States ambassador to Canada, Pete Hoekstra, lost his composure in full view of senior officials, business leaders, and diplomats. His outburst, directed at Ontario's trade representative David Patterson, stunned the room. Those who were there described a sudden eruption of anger, sharp words, and visible discomfort that cut through the evening's polished formality. Even the ambassador's own wife, witnesses say, later offered a quiet apology to the Canadian side. What might have been dismissed as a fleeting temper has instead become a national debate about respect, dignity, and how far a friend can go before crossing a line. By the next morning, the story had already broken across every major Canadian outlet. The question wasn't just whether the ambassador had overstepped, but how Ottawa should respond. Ontario's Premier Doug Ford was quick to condemn the behavior, calling it unacceptable and unbecoming of a senior diplomat. He demanded a formal apology from Washington. Within hours, the conversation spread beyond politics into the very heart of Canada's national character. The idea that courtesy and composure are not signs of weakness, but of strength. At Carleton University, scholar Fen Hampson published an opinion piece urging Canada's Foreign Affairs Department to issue what's known as a démarche, a rare and formal diplomatic reprimand, even between close allies. It's a tool seldom used, one that signals deep disapproval without breaking relations. But for many in Ottawa, this time felt different. Commentators across the political spectrum said the issue had gone beyond mere protocol. Berating a provincial official on Canadian soil struck a raw nerve. Analysts noted that diplomacy isn't just about treaties and trade, it's about tone, civility, and the small gestures that make cooperation possible. And yet, even as Ottawa considers its next steps, it faces a familiar dilemma: how to stand firm without deepening divisions. Sources close to Prime Minister Mark Carney's government say officials are weighing several responses, from a quiet diplomatic note to the more pointed act of summoning the ambassador for a formal dressing down. Such moves, while symbolic, carry weight. They speak to a country's willingness to defend its dignity, not through anger, but through measured resolve. This controversy comes at a delicate time for Canada. The 2026 review of the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement is fast approaching. Trade tensions are rising, and with Washington increasingly driven by protectionist politics, Ottawa finds itself balancing pragmatism with pride. Carney's cabinet, insiders say, is determined to maintain calm, a strategy described by one official as quiet firmness, a refusal to be provoked, but also a refusal to be belittled. Because in diplomacy, as one professor put it, restraint can sometimes speak louder than rage. The Hoekstra affair, as it's now being called, may have begun as an emotional lapse at a dinner table, but its significance has grown far beyond the event itself. It's become a reflection of a wider shift, a sense that Washington's dealings with its allies have become colder, more transactional, less bound by the old courtesies of partnership. Trade talks have increasingly felt like tests of loyalty. Cooperative language has given way to confrontation. And so, when an ambassador loses his temper in public, many see it not as an isolated outburst, but as a symptom of something deeper, a changing attitude toward power. By contrast, Canada's measured response has drawn international attention. Analysts in London, Brussels, and Tokyo describe Ottawa's approach as quietly assertive, a style of diplomacy that values principle over theater. And as Washington tightens its grip, Canada is widening its reach. New partnerships with Europe, energy deals with South Korea, trade talks with ASEAN, all part of a deliberate effort to diversify and ensure that no single partner, however powerful, can dictate the terms of engagement. It's a strategy born not of defiance, but of necessity. Yet the tension with Washington has also spurred a renewed conversation at home about sovereignty, energy, and self-reliance. A conversation that's now echoing far from Ottawa in the rolling green hills and rocky ridges of Nova Scotia. There, something remarkable is unfolding. What began as a quiet geological survey has evolved into what officials are calling a turning point, a moment of discovery that could reshape the province's future. The sound of drilling has returned to the Nova Scotian countryside as the province embarks on an ambitious new chapter in its economic story. For years, Nova Scotia, like many resource-rich regions of Canada, has watched global demand for minerals soar while its own policies remained cautious, even hesitant. But that caution is now giving way to confidence. Earlier this year, the provincial government lifted its long-standing ban on uranium extraction, ended its moratorium on fracking for natural gas, and shortened approval timelines for mining projects. The decision, surprising even veteran observers, signals a profound shift, one rooted in a new kind of pragmatism. The world's hunger for critical minerals is growing faster than ever. Lithium, cobalt, rare earth elements, the raw materials that power electric cars, wind turbines, and defense technologies. For decades, Canada supplied some of these resources, but largely on others' terms. Now, provinces like Nova Scotia intend to rewrite that story. Officials in Halifax call it economic sovereignty. The idea is simple. If the world needs what Canada has, then Canada must set the terms of trade. At Brazil Lake, a quiet community surrounded by dense forest and granite hills, drilling has begun for lithium, the so-called white gold of the modern age. It hasn't been without controversy. Some local residents and indigenous groups say they've been left out of crucial decisions. Raising concerns about land rights and environmental impact, the government insists it's listening, promising that the new resource policy will balance growth with stewardship. Yet for many, the move marks a clear break from the past, a province willing to take bold risks to shape its own destiny. By 2022, Nova Scotia had received more than 27,000 mineral exploration claims, triple the number from just a few years earlier. Half of those claims were for lithium alone. Experts at the International Energy Agency estimate that global demand for lithium could increase 40-fold by 2040. That's not just an economic opportunity, it's a geopolitical one. And in this race for resources, Canada no longer intends to play the junior partner. The shift in Nova Scotia reflects a wider national pattern. As the United States doubles down on its America First agenda, with tariffs ranging from 10 to 100% on key imports, Ottawa has responded by re-engineering its industrial base. New trade links with Europe and Asia are now being forged. Not as alternatives, but as safeguards. Ironically, Washington's efforts to dominate North American supply chains have accelerated Canada's determination to build its own. The trade war that was meant to consolidate U.S. power may, in the long run, produce a more independent and resource-driven Canada. Still, the road ahead is far from simple. Environmental tensions, questions of Indigenous consultation, and global price volatility all pose real challenges. Yet beneath it all lies a sense of quiet determination. A belief that waiting is no longer an option. From Ottawa's diplomatic halls to Nova Scotia's drilling sites, a pattern is emerging. Canada asserting itself, politely, firmly, but unmistakably. The Hoekstra affair, though born from a single night of temper, has come to symbolize something much larger. A country defining what respect means in an age of shifting alliances and uncertain power. And as drills turn deep into the rock beneath Nova Scotia, they are tapping not only minerals but a deeper vein of national confidence, the conviction that in a turbulent world, Canada can stand on its own terms. In diplomacy, As in resource politics, tone matters. So too does self-respect. And from the embassy halls of Ottawa to the minds of the Maritimes, that message is being delivered clearly and calmly, because in the end, it is not the loudest voice that commands respect, but the one that refuses to lose it. This is Starscope News. Subscribe, stay informed, and stay ahead.